Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Cohen. In this video, I'm going to explain how ISEE scoring works and how you can figure out relatively accurate scores for your practice tests. First big point is that the ISEE doesn't provide you one cumulative score like other tests, like the SAT. It's a little unusual in this respect. Instead, it gives you four separate scores: a verbal score, quantitative reasoning score, reading comprehension score, mathematics achievement score. Each score is for one of the four sections on the test. Schools look at each individual score, but they also do consider the average of your scores, even though ISEE doesn't officially provide this. So this means that if maybe you don't do as well in one section, but you do really well on another section, that the strong score in one section can help make up somewhat for a lower score on a different section. Let's get into the scores. So the first score is the raw score. That's how many questions you answer correctly on each section. So there's no guessing penalty on the test. So the number of questions you answer correctly on each section will always equal your raw score for that section. Now what the ISEE does is they take that raw score and they convert it into a scaled score. It's a little bizarre, but the scoring range on the ISEE runs from 760 to 940. That's for each of the four sections. Don't ask me why. It's a little arbitrary, a little confusing. But now, the how you convert the raw score to the scale score, that will vary a little bit from test to test. If the ISEE thinks they've written a somewhat more difficult test than they normally write, there'll be a slightly easier curve, and you'll get a higher scaled score for your raw score than you would on a test that's an average or a lower difficulty level. Sometimes there's a little variation in just what scaled score you'll get for a given raw score, depending on the difficulty of that exam form. Okay, now once you have the scaled score, you're also assigned a percentile rank, and that just tells you what percentile your score places you in based on, so it compares your score to the scores of all the students in your grade over the past 3 years. Now if you have a 50th percentile score, this means that you scored as well or better than 50% of the people who took the test. 60% you scored as well or better than 60% of test takers, and so on and so on. Now, none of these things are very important. The raw score, the scaled score, and the percentile score aren't looked at very much by admissions committees. And by the way, again, there's going to be some variation in how the scaled score relates to the percentile score. It usually stays about the same, but there's a little flux from year to year as the makeup of the testing groups change, but it's usually pretty constant. Okay, so that's how it works. But then so none of those scores really matter that much for the admissions committee. What matters is something called the Day9 score. So what the ISEE does, you have to bear with me. I know this is a lot. What the ISEE does is they take the percentile, and they convert that percentile into what they call a Day9. Day9s range from 1 to 9. 1 is the lowest, 9 is the highest. 5 is average. That's right in the middle. Below 5, below average. Above 5, above average. Now, on the article where I explain ISEE scoring on my blog, which you can get through my website, you can find this on the ISEE site, you can find what Day9 score you'll get based on your percentile score for any section. And the percentile to Day9 relationship always stays the same. And so to give you an example, Day9 9, the highest Day9, that's reserved for percentiles 96 to 99, 8 is 89 to 95, 7 is 77 to 88, 6, 60 to 76, 5, the average, goes from the 40 to 59th percentiles of test takers, right in the middle. You want to think again about the Day9 score. That's what you want to look at. And what's a good ISEE score, a good Day9? It really depends on where you are applying. at a lot of good private schools, a Day9 score of 5 or above is good enough for entry. That's, often the case. Now, at some very competitive private schools, maybe in New York City or, metropolitan areas where there's a lot of competition to get into the schools often sometimes like to see a Day9 scores of 7 or above. And some of the most elite private schools, for instance, here in New York City, schools like Trinity, Dalton, Horace Mann, these schools, they often like to see 8s and 9s. But for those most selective schools, typically if you can hit 7s, that's not going to throw your application out. They're not going to throw it out. You still have a chance at those schools and might well get into a number of them. It's important to remember that ISEE scores, your percentile on the ISEE is probably going to be lower, at least at first, than your percentile on other types of standardized testing or national testing. And the reason is the ISEE isn't determining the percentiles from among a random sample of students in the country. They're basing the percentiles off your peers who are applying to selective private schools. So these students who are taking the test tend to, be generally strong academically, preparing for the test. It's a self-selecting group of students. And for that reason, it's a more competitive pool of students. And, thus, if you get 5 Day9 scores, the average score, that does not mean that you are, an average student academically. You would be above average in reality. I really recommend trying to find out what scores are expected or are typical of admitted students at the schools you'll be applying to. So you can give their admissions office a call. And, some schools publish this information on their website. As you prepare for the ISEE, it's really important to take time to practice tests, both official, there's only a few, and unofficial, when you run out of the official tests. But none of these really provide accurate scoring information. So if you take, one of these tests, the score you'll get is going to fall within a large range of Day9s. This is a little, this is unfortunate, but it's kind of the way it is. But there's what you can do, a good rule of thumb to get around this, and it's not perfect, but what you can do is take the percentage of questions you answered correctly on any section. So count the number of questions you answered correctly in a section, divide that by the total number of questions in that section, and then multiply your result by 100. That'll be the percentage you answered correctly. Now you can take the number in the tens place, and that will roughly equate to the Day9. So for example, if you answered 90% of the questions correctly, you have a 9 Day9. You're at a 9 Day9 or above, roughly. 80 to 89%, an 8 Day9. 70 to 79%, 7 Day9, and so on. If you found this video helpful, please like it, share it, or subscribe to the channel, all of which will help me find more people looking for this type of information. Thanks.